When I saw Karen Langford shove my daughter so hard she hit the brick post by our front door and scraped her arm on the way down, something inside me broke. Lucy wasn't even saying anything to her. She was just standing there, clutching the paper grocery bag she had helped carry from the car, and Karen came at her like she was a threat to national security. Over a bag of apples and a carton of eggs. That was the moment everything changed. Up until then I'd been trying to play by the rules. I'd paid the ridiculous fine for fishing. I'd trimmed the bushes exactly 3 inches back like the handbook said. I even repainted my mailbox because Karen said the color interfered with community harmony. But this was something else. This was a line I wasn't going to let anyone cross. What Karen didn't know, standing there with her little clipboard and smug grin, was that I wasn't just some grieving single dad trying to keep his head down. I was a man with resources, connections, and 22 years of experience in high-stakes corporate investigations. I've helped companies unseat CEOs, freeze assets, and dismantle entire boards. But nothing, not a single scandal, not one corrupt executive, ever made my blood run cold like seeing my kid hurt in her own front yard. She made a mistake that day. Karen pushed the wrong child and lit the fuse on something she couldn't control. What she also didn't know. I already had a file on her 3 inches thick, and I was just waiting for the right moment to make my move. That moment came sooner than she thought. By the time this story ends, Karen will be facing criminal charges, her real estate empire will collapse, and the very lake she tried to steal will carry my wife's name. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because before the arrests, before the public humiliation, before the entire neighborhood turned against her, I was just a dad trying to take his daughter fishing. But before we dive into how I went from passive neighbor to the guy who took down the most corrupt HOA president in state history, I want to ask you for a quick favor. If you're watching this while hiding out from your own HOA disaster, or just avoiding someone named Karen in your life, tap that like button to help this video reach others. It really supports the channel more than you know. And hey, we post brand new HOA stories every single day, so if you enjoy watching justice served cold, make sure you're subscribed. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and tell me your city or town. We always get the best stories from the comment section, and you might just see your own HOA horror featured next. Now, let me take you back to where it all started, before the lawsuits, before the secret meetings, before Karen put her hands on my kid. 2 months before the push, before the blood on Lucy's elbow and the fire in my chest, I was just a man trying to rebuild something that cancer had torn apart. My name is Charlie Whitaker. I'm 47, widowed, and until recently, I ran a boutique consulting firm in Chicago. After my wife died, I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Lucy, my daughter, stopped laughing. Hell, she barely spoke. So I sold the business, packed everything into a U-Haul, and drove us 12 hours south, hoping a change of scenery might bring some peace. Silver Lake Bluffs looked like peace on a postcard. Tree-lined streets, fancy mailboxes, a man-made lake in the center of the neighborhood, and a neat little sign with gold lettering that read, "A community committed to excellence." We bought a 3-bedroom cottage on Ash Willow Lane with a wraparound porch and a clear view of the water. The realtor, a young guy named Greg with too many teeth, mentioned the HOA like it was no big deal. "Nothing intense," he said. "Just basic rules to keep the place nice. Oh, and the president is Karen Langford. Bit of a stickler, but nothing you can't handle." If that wasn't a red flag, I don't know what is. We moved in mid-February. Lucy chose the room with the bay window and set up her telescope first thing. That made me smile. It had been months since I'd seen her care about anything. The first week passed quietly. We met a few neighbors, friendly enough though they all seemed careful, measured, like people who'd learned not to say too much out loud. Then came the lake. Lucy had found our old fishing gear in a moving box labeled camping stuff, and lit up like a Christmas tree. "Do you think we can try this weekend, Dad? Just like before?" How could I say no to that? Saturday morning, bright and clear. We walked to the small dock near the east side of the lake. She wore my wife's old fishing hat, too big for her, and laughed every time it slipped down over her eyes. I swear to you, I almost cried just seeing that smile. She caught her first bluegill within 20 minutes. She let out a little gasp, then a triumphant shout. "Dad, look at this thing. He's huge." He wasn't. But that wasn't the point. That's when the voice came. "Excuse me. Just what exactly do you think you're doing?" She appeared like a storm cloud in yoga pants. Karen Langford. Mid-50s. Bleach blonde bob. Designer sneakers. Holding a leather clipboard like it was a royal scepter. I stood up, polite. "Just fishing with my daughter. We just moved in, Ash Willow Lane." She didn't shake my hand. Didn't introduce herself. Just looked down at Lucy's small tackle box with a kind of disgust, then tapped something on a tablet. You're in violation of HOA Code 14C. Fishing is prohibited in Silver Lake without a recreational permit, which, as of last month, no longer exists. I blinked. The realtor told me this was a community amenity. It was. Until the board voted to revoke fishing access due to environmental concerns. Like what? Hooks injuring ducks. Trash. Bait smell. Disruption of the view. I looked around. The lake was empty. We were the only ones there. I tried to stay calm. We always catch and release. We clean up after ourselves. Rules are rules. A citation will be issued. $500. And consider this a formal warning. Lucy's face crumpled. I saw the joy vanish in real time. And Karen? She looked satisfied. We left in silence. That night I checked every folder in my email, including spam. No notice. No vote. No nothing. That's when I started digging. At first it was just late-night Googling. Silver Lake Bluffs HOA corruption. Karen Langford complaints. Can an HOA ban fishing? Most results were useless. But then I found a private Facebook group, Bluff Resistance Circle, invite only. I sent a request. 3 hours later, I got a message from someone named Nora Hastings. You're new, right? What happened? I told her everything. She replied with 3 words, you're not alone. Turns out, Karen had been running the HOA like a miniature empire for nearly a decade. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was writing them, rewriting them, bending them, and using them as weapons. Minor infractions turned into major fines. Fines turned into liens. Homes got devalued, then snapped up at discount prices by connected buyers. Guess who owned the real estate agency representing most of those buyers? That's right, Karen. But still I kept quiet. I wasn't ready for a fight. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping notes. I printed every email. Took photos of community signs, compared them to the updated rules Karen kept referencing. Something wasn't adding up. Then came the parade of pettiness. First it was Lucy's bike. She left it by the garage for 10 minutes, violation notice. Then our mailbox, wrong beige. Then the lawn, grass too inconsistent in tone. All from Karen. All signed in her looping, aggressive cursive. The neighbors? They watched. Some with pity. Some with fear. No one said anything. Except one. Eleanor Greaves. 82. Lived across the street since 1987. She called me over one morning while watering her roses. She's poked the bear, hasn't she? Eleanor said, smiling without humor. She always goes too far. How do people live like this? They don't. Not for long. She's driven out 6 families in 3 years. Either through fines or social pressure. And nobody stops her? Eleanor shrugged. People are tired, son. And scared. But if you're planning something, she looked me in the eye, you won't be alone. Still, I didn't plan anything until the push. That Saturday Lucy and I went grocery shopping. She grabbed the light bags like she always does and walked up the steps while I closed the car trunk. Karen was waiting by the porch. I still don't know why. Maybe the grocery bag touched a rose bush. Maybe Lucy didn't say, hello, fast enough. Maybe Karen just needed to feel powerful. What I do know is that she shouted something, Lucy flinched, and when I looked up, Karen was shoving her backward with one hand. Lucy hit the door frame. Dropped the bag. Apples rolled down the steps. She yelped, staggered, then looked up, dazed. And Karen? Karen smoothed her jacket like nothing had happened and walked off down the sidewalk. Like a queen who just disciplined the help. She didn't see me standing there. But I saw everything. And in that moment, every ounce of restraint I had left disappeared. Karen Langford made one fatal mistake. She thought I'd just swallow it. She thought I'd take that shove, that scrape on my daughter's arm and back down like everyone else had. What she didn't know was that I've fought men with law degrees and billion-dollar war chests and come out ahead. You can't scare a man who's already lost the most important thing in his life. And you definitely can't scare a father whose daughter just got manhandled on her own porch. That night, after Lucy fell asleep, with a Band-Aid on her elbow and eyes red from crying, I sat down at the kitchen table with a legal pad and made 2 lists. One titled What I Know, the other, What I Need to Find Out. On the first list I wrote, Karen runs the HOA. She enforces selectively. People are afraid of her. She pushed my daughter. On the second list I wrote, who supports her? Where's the money go? Who really owns the lake? That last one would turn out to be the key. But I didn't know it yet. I'd spent my career unraveling dirty systems. I just didn't think I'd be doing it in a neighborhood with golf carts and ornamental hedges. But once I started digging, I found rot everywhere. The next morning, I knocked on Eleanor Greaves' door. She let me in without a word, just nodded and poured me coffee like she'd been waiting for this moment. She led me to a sunroom filled with plants and old books, and slid a photo album across the table. Inside were clippings, notes, typed documents. Violation notices going back over 8 years. She pushed Lucy, I said quietly. Eleanor didn't blink. I believe you. I tapped the folder. You've been keeping track? Some of us have, she said. But no one's ever put it all together. So I decided to change that. That week, I talked to 6 different neighbors, quietly, privately. A retired Army colonel. A single mom with 3 kids. A florist who used to run a community garden before Karen had it shut down for unauthorized soil placement. Every single one had a story. Every single one had been fined, cited, threatened, or humiliated in some way. And most of them had either sold their homes or were thinking about it. A pattern was forming. Karen would cite people until they either paid endlessly or sold cheap out of frustration. Then a private buyer would swoop in, fix up the house, and flip it for a profit. And guess who was always the listing agent? Wellington and Langford Realty. Karen's company. The next step was finding out more about the lake. Because I couldn't shake the feeling that the fishing ban had been more than just a personal vendetta. It felt strategic. Like Karen had a long-term plan. I visited the county assessor's office and requested property records. The lake was listed as Silver Lake Parcel #C18472. The owner? A company called Riverstone Development Partners. Not the HOA. That sent a jolt through me. If the HOA didn't own the lake, they couldn't make permanent rules about its use. They were leasing it. That meant someone else could buy it. I drove straight to the library and started searching the public archives. After an hour, I found the document I was looking for. A 30-year recreational use agreement signed back in 1993. It gave the HOA control over lake access, but with a key clause. The lease would expire in less than 2 months, and the owner had the right to refuse renewal for any reason. 2 months. 8 weeks. That's how long I had. If I could buy the lake, everything would change. But I couldn't do it alone. That night, I sent Eleanor a text. We need to talk. Bring anyone who's ready to fight back. The next evening, I hosted 5 people in my garage. We locked the door. We didn't turn on the lights. Everyone came with a folder, a story, or both. Samuel Riley, a former bank branch manager, showed us spreadsheets of violation data. New homeowners get hit hardest, he said. Especially single parents and minorities. The data doesn't lie. Nina Torres, the florist, brought photographs. Karen holding events by the lake with wine, music, and catered food. No fines, no rules broken there. Because Karen didn't fine herself. We built a timeline. We mapped connections. We started identifying who Karen's inner circle was. Her husband's cousin was on the zoning board. Her best friend oversaw the HOA's finance committee. Her real estate partner owned 5 houses on the same street. It was a web. A tight, tangled web of control. And it was working until now. I created a private group chat under the name Project Lighthouse. We used encrypted messages. Every violation notice was photographed and uploaded. Every meeting logged. We were building a case and we were careful. Because people who opposed Karen publicly, well, let's just say things started happening to them. And sure enough, it started happening to me. My mailbox was too short. My front porch light too bright. One day, I got a notice saying my grass was visually inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. I started photographing everything. Dates, times, angles. I installed security cameras. I logged each infraction in a spreadsheet. I wasn't just fighting for Lucy anymore, I was collecting ammunition. Then one evening Samuel called me. I pulled credit filings, he said. Wellington and Langford is over-leveraged. Karen's running on fumes. That changed everything. She wasn't doing this for power. She was doing it to stay afloat. And if she was counting on the lake as her next big investment, I was going to take it out from under her. But I had to move fast and smart. Karen wasn't stupid. She had friends. She had watchers. If I made the wrong move too soon, she'd shut me down. So I called a contact from my consulting days. A real estate lawyer named Donna Liu. I told her I needed to make a private offer to a distressed asset holder. Quiet. No leaks. We began putting together a plan to purchase Silver Lake. And all the while, Karen kept tightening her grip on the community. Hosting closed-door HOA meetings. Sending out glossy flyers about elevating community standards. whispering that I was causing problems. I let her talk, because I knew something she didn't. In exactly 6 weeks, her empire would lose its crown jewel, and she'd never see it coming. I first heard Grant Beasley's name from Donna, my real estate attorney. She found it buried in the old registry logs of the county's land records. Riverstone Development Partners was listed as the owner of Silver Lake, but the real person behind the company was Grant, one of the original investors who helped build Silver Lake Bluffs before it was even a gated community. I didn't want to spook him with a cold call, so I did something old school. I wrote him a letter. A real letter, handwritten. No drama, no accusations. Just a quiet, respectful message from a father who wanted to know more about the place he now called home. I added a photo of Lucy holding her fishing rod by the dock. She looked happy in that picture. It was taken 5 minutes before Karen found us. 3 days later, Grant called me. His voice was low, calm, and sharper than I expected. "You really want to buy the lake?" he asked. "I do," I said. "Not to flip it. Not to build on it. Just to protect it. For my daughter. For the people here." We met 2 days later at a diner off Highway 8. Grant looked like a man who didn't care much for show. Plaid shirt, weathered hands, and a worn leather notebook he brought with him. The guy had no laptop, no iPad, just handwritten notes and a memory like steel. He listened to everything, about the fishing ban, the ridiculous fines, Karen pushing Lucy. He didn't interrupt once. When I was done, he sat back, folded his hands and said, "She lied to me too." Turns out, Karen had been trying to buy the lake through a shell company registered in another county. She'd framed it as a community project, but Grant started hearing whispers about her private wine parties, the fees, the control, the abuse. She used the lake as a weapon, and none of that sat right with him. "I didn't build this place so someone could turn it into a fiefdom," he said. "If you want the lake, make me a clean offer. Keep it safe. Keep it public. I'll sell it to you." We shook on it right there. The next few days were a blur. Donna and I drafted a private purchase agreement and filed the preliminary paperwork with a confidentiality clause. We had 5 weeks until the HOA's recreational lease expired. 5 weeks until I would own the one thing Karen had built her power around. While that was moving behind the scenes, Karen was busy in front of the curtain. I got an official invite to an HOA community enhancement meeting. Sounded innocent enough. But when I walked into the clubhouse, it was decked out like a political rally. Banners, food trays, a projector, and Karen at the front, smiling like she was about to win an election. Silver Lake Elite, the poster behind her read. "Coming soon." Karen started talking about her vision, luxury upgrades, a members-only lakeside club, private paddleboard rentals, a wine deck, and even a boutique coffee bar. She spoke like she was unveiling Disneyland. And then she dropped the bomb. "In partnership with Riverstone," she said, "we're finalizing an acquisition of Silver Lake itself. Once it's secured, this vision will become reality, and home values will soar." I just sat there in the back row trying not to laugh. She had no idea. The very man she claimed to be partnering with had already agreed to sell the lake, to me. The paperwork was nearly done. I left the meeting early. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I couldn't wait to tell the group. Project Lighthouse, our little resistance cell, was gaining traction. The private chat was up to 17 members now. Homeowners, former board members, even 2 people Karen had tried to evict. Every single one of them had a story. And every story built the case. But I knew we needed more than a whisper campaign. We needed community support, visible support. And we had to do it without making Karen suspicious. So we planned something sneaky, a casual neighborhood get-together at Eleanor's house. No flyers. No politics. Just an impromptu evening with barbecue, string lights, and oldies music playing low. We called it Sunset Supper, and invited everyone we trusted, which at that point was maybe 24 people. But that evening changed everything. People showed up. People stayed. People talked. I walked around with iced tea and made light conversation, but everywhere I went, I heard the same themes: frustration, exhaustion, fear. Not one person liked how things were being run. Most were just too afraid to say anything out loud. Until that night. Eleanor stood up halfway through and raised her glass. "To the neighbors who still remember what a neighborhood is supposed to feel like," she said. And just like that, people started opening up. One man told me Karen fined him $1,200 for excessive noise during his wife's funeral reception. Another said his kid was cited for public mischief because he was playing with sidewalk chalk on the community trail. It was horrifying. And it was fuel. We documented every story, every date, every dollar. And meanwhile, Karen was still blissfully unaware. She was preparing her champagne toast. And I was preparing to pull the rug out from under her entire world. The deal with Grant was moving fast. Donna finalized the purchase agreement and filed it quietly with the county registrar's office. Within 2 weeks, I would legally own Silver Lake, and Karen had no clue. But time was ticking and I wasn't going to sit back and wait for closing day. The moment I got that property in my name, I wanted the entire community to already be leaning in our direction. I needed to shake Karen's throne before I yanked it out from under her. So we pushed ahead with Phase 2 of Project Lighthouse, exposure. Not some messy confrontation. Not yet. Just small cracks. Subtle moves to loosen her grip. The first step? Public records. Samuel Riley, our ex-bank manager with a taste for numbers, filed a Freedom of Information request on the HOA's financials. Karen had always been vague about budgets. Dues went up every year but no one ever saw a breakdown. Operational costs, she'd say. Community initiatives. Well, Samuel found the receipts. $18,000 billed to community outreach events. Translation: wine nights for Karen's clique. $42,000 on aesthetic enhancements, including a single imported stone fountain, for her own cul-de-sac. Thousands spent on legal consultations, mostly with the same firm that handled Karen's private real estate deals. We compiled everything into a clean, easy-to-read report. Then we printed 20 copies and quietly slid them into mailboxes during the early morning hours. No return address. No call to action. Just facts. Within 24 hours, the chat group doubled in size. The next step was psychological. Karen's control didn't just come from fines and threats, it came from fear. People were afraid to ask questions. So we started asking them. At the next HOA meeting, Eleanor raised her hand and in her sweet, cracking voice asked, "Could you explain why the neighborhood fund paid for a second gazebo when the first one is still covered in mold?" Karen blinked. Someone else asked about the new entry gate that looked suspiciously like a cheaper model than the one listed in the newsletter. Then Samuel stood up and politely asked, "Is it true the HOA lease on Silver Lake expires in less than 2 months?" That one landed like a grenade. Karen's smile froze. She adjusted her notes, coughed and said, "That's a private matter. The board is handling it." But the damage was done. The room had changed. People started whispering to each other, exchanging glances. The silence she had ruled with was cracking. The following week, Karen made her move. She sent out an emergency newsletter titled, "Correcting Misinformation." It called our group, a small but vocal group of troublemakers, and denied all allegations. She listed several upcoming improvements, and even included a blurry photo of her shaking hands with someone near the lake, claiming it was part of a new partnership agreement. But the man in the photo wasn't Grant. It was a maintenance worker named Carl. I knew because Carl was in our group. We printed that photo, added the caption, "Not Grant," and slid it into the next batch of mailers. That one made people laugh. The fear? It was fading. But laughter wasn't enough. Karen still had the power to ruin people's lives with a form and a clipboard. We needed a real shift. And we got it, when Nina, the florist, brought us a flash drive. "I got this from my ex," she said. "He works at a local print shop." Karen's friend from the finance committee ordered a batch of internal memos last month. One of them, "You'll want to see." She was right. It was a scanned letter from Karen to the HOA board, proposing a vote to suspend community voting privileges for any homeowner currently disputing a violation. In plain English, if you challenged her, you lost your vote. It hadn't passed. Yet. But the fact that she even wrote it? That was gasoline. We added it to our growing archive and prepared our next move, a full-blown presentation. We booked the community center under a neutral name, Neighborhood Review and Discussion. No mention of the HOA. Just an open forum. We weren't sure how many would come. Over 60 people showed up. We served coffee, cookies, and handed out printed reports. No anger. No shouting. Just data. Charts. Photos. Emails. Memos. Testimonies. We didn't tell anyone what to think. We let the truth do the talking. By the end of the night, you could feel it. The community was turning. Karen, meanwhile, was getting more aggressive. She started patrolling the neighborhood on foot, clipboard in hand, writing citations in real time. She fined a guy for having a faded welcome mat. She fined a woman for leaving wind chimes up past community quiet hours. It was desperation. The queen could feel the throne shaking. And soon, it would disappear entirely. The final days before the lake deal closed felt like walking through a minefield with a lighter in my hand. Karen was everywhere. She must have sensed something was off. The usual fear in people's eyes was fading, and her clipboard didn't carry the same weight anymore. But instead of backing off, she doubled down. Notices were flying out like confetti. Mailbox paint fading. Flag too large. Holiday decor displayed past seasonal guidelines. One guy got fined because his dog barked 3 times in 1 hour. She was lashing out and everyone could feel it. And then she upped the game. We got word that Karen had called a mandatory HOA special session to announce a major acquisition that would change the future of Silver Lake Bluffs. No surprise what she meant, the lake. She still believed the sale was hers. We knew this was it. This would be the night we'd strike back, publicly with facts. The paperwork wasn't 100% final yet, but the contracts were signed. We just needed a day or two to file the last deed transfer. So the plan was to attend, stay quiet, and let her dig her own grave. The clubhouse was packed. Fold-out chairs filled every corner. Karen was in her element, standing tall in a crisp white blazer, smiling like she'd just won a national award. She launched into her speech. We are thrilled to share that the HOA has secured exclusive rights to Silver Lake through a long-term agreement with Riverstone Development. This will allow us to begin the next phase of our community evolution. Private access. Controlled recreation. Increased property value. True exclusivity. People clapped, but not as loud as she expected. Some just stared. Then came the slideshow. Mock-ups of docks, paddleboards, lawn parties, banners with phrases like, members only, prestige always. And then, the kids section. Karen clicked to a photo of a playground renovation, right next to a huge red X over a fishing rod. This community must move beyond outdated activities that damage our brand, she said. Children will no longer be allowed to fish at the lake. We need to maintain a refined environment. Lucy turned to look at me. I saw her jaw tighten. Her eyes start to water. That's when Karen saw her and smirked. I stood up. Karen, are you saying my daughter can't stand on a dock and catch a fish anymore? Karen gave a little laugh. That's correct, Mr. Whitaker. If your child wants to fish, there's always the public lake 3 towns over. There was a shift in the room. People looked at each other. Some mouths dropped. A woman in the back whispered, "What the hell?" I could feel the anger rising in my chest. But I didn't speak. Not yet. Then Lucy stood up too. And that's when everything snapped. Karen looked her up and down and said loud enough for everyone to hear, maybe she should focus on her manners instead of fishing. Lucy started to step toward her, but she didn't even make it 2 steps. Karen shoved her. Not a stumble. Not an accident. A full palm to the shoulder. In front of 50 people. Hard enough that Lucy fell back, tripping over a chair leg, landing on her side with a yelp. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Every person in that room froze. Karen's hand still outstretched. Lucy trying to sit up. Me, frozen for half a second, then moving faster than I had in years. I knelt beside Lucy. She was crying. Her elbow was scraped again, and she held her ribs like it hurt to breathe. I stood up. I looked Karen in the eye. I didn't raise my voice. But I said loud enough for everyone to hear. You just laid hands on my daughter. In front of witnesses. Karen's lips twitched. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I turned to the crowd. You wanted to know who she really is? I pointed at Karen. You just saw it. Then I looked back at Lucy, picked up her bag and walked her out the door. No one tried to stop us. No one said a word. But behind me I heard it, that first small ripple of something breaking loose. A woman gasped. A man cursed under his breath. A few stood up. Chairs scraped the floor. Karen had just crossed the line. And this time there were too many eyes to deny it. She put her hands on my daughter. That's when it stopped being about rules and became war. If you want to see how we took everything from her, piece by piece, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Part 2 is where it all comes crashing down.